Hi, my name is Shanicia and today I am taking you along as I make fresh mill flour bread for my family. When I make fresh mill flour bread, I find it a lot easier if I weigh my ingredients by grams. It also makes it a lot easier to mill exactly the amount that I need. If it happens that I mill more than I needed, I usually place it in the freezer. In this recipe, I am using 700 grams of hard white wheat, 300 grams of kamut, also known as croissant, 20 grams of salt, 10 grams of instant yeast, 80 grams of honey, 60 grams of avocado oil. This is the oil of choice for me, with 700 grams of lukewarm water. I like to mix cold and hot water together to make my water lukewarm. I usually use sunflower lecithin in my bread. It's basically an emulsifier. It helps to give my bread a better rise and structure. You can use an egg instead if you want to, which I do from time to time. I find with hard wheat, this step is not necessary, it's optional. But my family isn't fussy, they love fresh mill flour bread, and I don't have the pressure of making my breads comparable to white flour breads. I place my dough on my mixer to knead for about 5 to 8 minutes. A lot of people like to autolyse where they let their dough rest for a certain amount of time. And you would do this because fresh mill flour is very thirsty and it needs more water than all-purpose flour. So you will let it rest with just the water and the flour, and then afterwards, after a certain time, when your hydration is perfect, then you add your yeast and all your other ingredients. But I'm just letting my dough now rest for about 40 minutes. I put it in my stove because my stove is just a controlled area and it has not been on for a while. The next bread that I will make is spelt bread. I use the same ingredients but with less water. With spelt flour, I don't knead as long. I don't want to overdo it. I don't go over 3 minutes of kneading in my KitchenAid. I am not sure about other mixers. If you overmix spelt flour, it becomes sticky and gummy. Spelt has a delicate gluten structure that breaks down easily. After my kneading is complete, I put my dough in an oiled bowl to become puffy but not necessarily doubled in size. There's this recipe for a seed bread that I absolutely love, and since I was already in the kitchen, I thought I'd try making it with fresh mill flour. I added some of my own things compared to the recipe, and it's a recipe from King Arthur's bread book. This recipe called for specific seeds, but I used seeds I already had on hand, such as sunflower seed and pumpkin seeds. It also needed cornmeal, and I didn't have any in hand, so instead I used wheat bran. I sifted soft white wheat recently to make a cake, and so I saved the bran and I added to my bread because it's nutritious and why make it go to waste? In this recipe, all the seeds, including rolled oats and salt, are left to sponge together in hot water. And I let them rest for about 20 minutes. The grains that I use here in this bread is einkorn and hard red wheat. I have a Como mill, but I realized that since my family is so large, I will need to eventually get a larger mill. Most of the time, I mill about 1,000 grams or more of grain at a time, and this mill is a little too small for that. It's not a big deal. I'll just add a little bit at a time, but it would be nice to have something a little bit larger. While I am waiting for my breads and everything to be milled, I like to make myself some tea. I am a tea girly and I drink tea at any time of the day. If you love tea, let me know. Drop a teacup at the bottom. After 20 minutes, the seed sponge looks like porridge. I'm going to use the same dirty bowl to make the seed loaves. I personally like to always add my water first, as you can see from previously when I was making my other breads. And that's because it makes it just easier to make sure that everything is mixed in. I then add my seeds to my water, and then I like to give it a little mix. And then after that, I add my yeast. And after my yeast, I add my honey. And I buy this big jug of honey because it's just so convenient, but I don't like the fact that it comes in a plastic jug. So hopefully eventually I'll be able to have my own bees that I can have my own honey from my backyard. Then I add my salt. And after I add my salt, I am going to add my oil. And I like to use avocado oil. But if you like to use any other kind of oil, you can also do that in your breads. But I just prefer using avocado oil because I am baking it. And I don't personally like using olive oil for baking. I rather use olive oil if I'm using it raw or fresh. And then I'm going to put everything to bake. As I said before, this recipe I am using einkorn flour and I'm using hard red wheat. With my leftover water from my dough, I am going to water my houseplants. Now that my dough has doubled in size, I am going to shape it. After shaping, I am going to let it rise until puffy. Then I'll bake it. Fresh milled flour can overproof rather quickly, so it's best to keep an eye on it. I always wanted to make really long loaves. I romanticized it in my head. I finally bought a long USA loaf pan, and even though it's nice, I much prefer the smaller loaf pans. It's just easier for me to control. But that bread dough, it looks so beautiful to me. And now we're going to move on to shaping our spelt bread. I love spelt bread. It's always been something that I do enjoy. And I actually never had spelt bread until I started milling my own flour. And the first time I did spelt, I actually mixed it with all-purpose flour. But now I just make only spelt flour by itself. And I really love it. I love adding a little bit more honey to the spelt, and it just gives it this really good taste. So spelt is something that I really do enjoy. My only downfall is that I always feel like I add a little bit too much water, just a little bit more hydration than I would prefer. So I think next time for this recipe that I will make my spelt bread to have a less hydration, meaning less water in my bread. And then for my spelt bread, I am going to put some honey butter on top. So I'm just melting a little bit of butter with a little bit of honey. I did not really measure this out, so I just did what I can. And then for my seed bread could have proofed a little bit more, but I just wanted to just have everything baking at the same time. So I just went ahead and just started shaping it. I measured it because I wanted them to be exactly the same size and weight. And so I'm just shaping it. This came out really good as far as what the dough looks like. Next time I'll probably try experimenting with different types of seed. I'll probably keep the base of the recipe, like the flour and everything else, just about the same. I would really like to try different types of seed and different types of things just to experiment to make a seed bread. I would like to try some millet and just different things, or even amaranth in my breads as well. And this pan I'm using is just a regular large 8x4 loaf pan. Just before my spelt bread was ready to go into the oven, I brushed it with my butter honey. This looks perfect. Wow, I love it. I bake the kamut and a hard white wheat and the spelt bread together in my oven at 375 degrees for about 40 to 45 minutes, but I also checked the internal temperature to make sure that they were about 190 degrees or higher. So my seed bread was the last to be baked, and I just used the leftover honey butter on top of my seed bread. I thought that it would complement it very well if I did this. Plus, I didn't want to leave my butter and honey to waste. And on top of it, I am going to add my wheat bran on top of my loaf to just give it that extra juju, the extra something on top of it. I thought that that would be very nice for it, so that I can have that with my breakfast or with my tea. I love seed bread with some butter. So delicious. So good. So good. So our first batch of bread is complete, and my husband is also working in the kitchen at the same time, so hence the hammer on my table. Now I am going to put my seed bread in the oven to bake for about 40 minutes on 375 degrees Fahrenheit. My long loaf came out looking really good. I love the way that it looks. It's so pretty. And now my seed loaf is finished, or my seed loaves are finished. And that's it. That's all the breads that I've made, and they're made from fresh milled flour, all from seed to bread. Isn't that beautiful? And I had to cut up my long loaf because it is just too long for my children to handle. So I like to slice it up just for my family and put them in separate bags. But that looks so good. It was soft, it's not hard or too super dense, and I'm so proud. I'm really happy about it, the way that it came out. Beautiful bread. And what's more beautiful than some nice bread that you can eat with some peanut butter and jelly? Well, I don't eat peanut butter and jelly so much anymore, but my children really love it. But it's really good sandwich breads. And my seed bread also came out beautifully. And that's it. So I thank you so much for watching. Bye.